Hello, everyone. Welcome to Console Room Year 11, Bigger on the Inside. This is yet another fantastic virtual panel that we are giving you this weekend as sort of an added aperitif, let's say, to your convention experience. I am Rob Levy, and I am super excited to be having a conversation with a really great artist and a fandom friend of mine, Kathryn Sullivan. Kathryn and I are both in a couple books together. She'll tell you about that, and she has books of her own as well. And yeah, hello.
Hello, I'm Kathryn Sullivan. I write middle grade fantasy, and I'm also in Children of Time, Companions to Doctor Who, with a short story and an essay. And Rob, you've got something in here as well?
When Alan Seiler asked me to do this, I decided to pick up the companions that nobody cared about. So I have Dodo and Katerina, and I think in Sarah Kingdom. I lumped them all into one essay. So that's mine. That's my contribution for that one.
I've got Zoe and Evelyn Smythe.
Ooh.
And we have Outside In Regenerates,
Uh,
where I wrote about the Crotons, and you wrote about
the Three Doctors, which was a lot of fun. I revisited it. I watched it about 4 times and took notes, and then I just decided to throw away my notes and had fun with it. So, but you and I have been doing convention panels together for a while, and we have kind of talked about music in Doctor Who before.
Oh yeah.
And I think the thing that we always find amazing is when we start thinking about it, how much familiar music is actually in Doctor Who than we might originally think, right? The most recent example of this is in the David Tennant specials, where we saw Spice Girls Spice Up Your Life. And I believe in the Eccleston era, we had Soft Cell Tainted Love. And I think we had Toxic by Britney Spears.
Yes.
Those are the 3 that come to my mind. I know you have a vast encyclopedic list. So why don't you fire away? We can just talk about these and how they're contexted within Doctor Who.
And there are some that are no longer available in the current media, but those of us old-time fans still have the videotapes and such. So first one is Beatles, Ticket to Ride in the Chase, which of course, when they re-released it, gone.
Yeah, when they aired that on PBS in St. Louis, it had that in it. So I did actually get to see it. I may buy the British box set just to have that.
Yeah. Another one that got erased, Paperback Writer, was by the Beatles.
Yes.
In The Evil of the Daleks. Now, if you get the current version of it, it's new jazz tunes by Mark Ayers. But the Telesnap reconstruction, way back, actually has it. So I was playing back my DVD of the Telesnap reconstruction. Like, yes, Paperback Writer, I recognize that. Yeah, anybody who had the VHS, no, not that one. Well, anybody who has a VHS copy of The Spirit from Space, you've got Oh Well by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh yeah.
When they were assembling the doll heads.
And that's not in the Blu-ray, is it?
Nope. They took it out. They basically have these mechanical noises.
Yeah.
So old-time fans have access to these things, and this one's more of a cheat because it's not the actual music, but in your 3 Doctors, you had Joe Grant
singing. Yeah.
Basically, I am the walrus, giving the whole lines, and he wants to play it on the recorder. But that's kind of a cheat, but it was mentioned. It
alludes, it dates it of the time. I also think that it makes Joe Grant seem a little more hip and a little more cool, and it does sort of show the age difference between the Doctor and the companion a little bit, the generational age, I think, right? And I think that was a pretty blatant attempt to keep young viewers at the time.
I mean, same thing with the Evil of the Daleks, where they're actually in a coffee bar and playing that music in the background, because they don't call it pop music, but what they were saying before they started playing Paperback Writer, they were playing Nobody's Knows the Trouble I've Seen. Really slow ballad.
Yeah.
And then of course in Revelation of the Daleks, you've got Purple Haze and A Whiter Shade of Pale, which again was replaced on the DVD. But those of us who got PBS, that was being
Yeah.
played by our DJ.
Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Another one that got
And,
overwritten, or am I going too fast?
no.
Okay. Taste of Honey by the
Yeah.
Beatles.
Yep.
And Do You Want to Know a Secret? On Remembrance of the Daleks.
Yeah, and speaking of remembrance, and I might be jumping ahead of this.
No,
That
go ahead.
the McCoy era, well, that one kind of had a musical sort of undertone to it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that was he was playing on the jukebox in the cafe scenes.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
those two songs.
McCoy was a little more musical than some of the other doctors, I
Oh
think, in
yeah.
terms of pop music. Because I think you get in Delta and the Bannerman, you kind of get an allusion to rock and roll,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And then where you get Ken Dot talking about rock and roll, and then in which one is it? Silver Nemesis? We get Courtney Pine, or is it Survive? No, Courtney Pine is in one of them.
I didn't
Um,
keep that on the list. Cool. That's a
no,
new one.
well, he's a jazz saxophonist, right?
Oh, okay.
And he was
Yeah.
actually in the episode.
Hmm.
And he was actually playing, and you see McCoy saying, "Oh, I'm listening to jazz," right? Um, which is pretty fantastic. And then I think also in the TV special, um, you get
Yeah.
some McCoy listening to, I believe, Billie Holiday.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
On his little gramophone,
yeah, exactly.
which was another nice touch. Basically,
Yeah, he was in Silver Nemesis. That's right. Which I thought he was, but yeah, that was a nice little touch
mhm.
because they had him play himself, and you see McCoy sitting there watching jazz, and then when you go back to the TV movie, he's sitting there alone, and there's a jazz vocal, which I believe is Billie Holiday playing.
Okay.
So the McCoy era does have its fair share
Hmm.
of music stuff in it. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, but and basically they record the jazz piece on the boombox. They turn into a weapon later on.
Yeah, there's a lot of musical stuff in McCoy. Oh, anyway, you have some other fantastic ones too.
Let's see. These were really, really faintly mentioned because it was on Father's Day. They had real small
Yeah,
patches of snow. They had Never Gonna Give You Up, Never Can Say Goodbye, and Don't Mug Yourself. And that was just right when Rose was saving her father from the car accident.
yeah,
Really brief. You barely heard it.
just enough that no one had to pay royalties.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the really creepy one was in Rise of the Cybermen. The Lion Sleeps Tonight.
Oh yeah, that was very.
Yee. Turns it on, it's drowned out all the sounds of the Cybermen killing people. Yee.
Yeah, which it's a very effective use of a song too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And also showed that parallel dimension had a lot of overlap with our own.
yeah, and I think too when you're watching a science fiction show, um, like Doctor Who, it is nice every once in a while to have these little tangent bits that people recognize from their pop culture to bring it in, to
Mhm.
bring it a little more closer to them, to kind of rein it in.
Yeah.
I mean, I think people that are general sci-fi fans like you and I, it's kind of superfluous because we'll still like it no matter what. But I
Mhm.
think if mom and dad are watching it with the kids, somebody in the family will be like, "Ooh," and they're kind of hooked, right?
Yeah.
And it also tethers it to a point in time
Yes.
with some of these episodes too, which I think really does help because you definitely, when you watch The Chase, can tell that you are in a particular era.
Mhm.
So I think that's interesting too.
Even though they took it out, so now we don't have that tether, but hey.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can buy the British one. And as I
Mhm.
learned on another panel, the British DVDs are not locked, so they will play in America.
Yes. Which is what I'm going to have to do with the specials. But I've got a region flea player. Oh, and the next one is Mr. Blue Sky on Love and Monsters.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I
Like,
think
listen to the
that is,
band.
and I think that is probably the most over a case of one song being used ad infinitum in an episode of Doctor Who,
But
right?
it's still appealing because you just
Yeah,
kind of got that feeling for that little group.
yeah,
Dipsy.
yeah.
Uh, the other one, of course, which they took out for the DVDs on over here, was The Sound of Drums and the I Can't Decide, the Scissor Sisters. from Last of the Time Lords.
Oh,
I
wow.
think they took that out, didn't they?
They may have. Wow. If they did, I did not notice.
Okay.
Um,
I'll have to go back and play my DVD.
yeah.
But there's so many that they took out. Now, after I got my list, because oh, the other one we didn't mention yet was Power of the Doctor, Rasputin, which I definitely agree with the Cyberman and the Dalek at that point.
By Boney M.
Yeah. Why the two of them looking at each other going,
Yeah.
why are we listening to this?
So here's a useless Boney M adjacent fact. You ready?
Okay.
So Boney M recorded Rah Rah Rasputin, right? Which was later covered by a band from Birmingham called Ice Dark County, who also recorded as Computer and another band called Fortran 5, right? So they did a cover of Rah Rah Rasputin, but they also did a song called 17 Pens. And in 17 Pens, they sample the Ian Chesterton bit from An Unearthly Child. Let me get this straight. A thing that looks like a police box standing in a junkyard. It can move anywhere in time and space. And they put that in the record. So that is your useless tying together fact of Doctor Who and pop music.
Oh my gosh, all the way back to the beginning. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that is so cool.
Yeah.
And
We
now,
talked oh, go ahead. We talked about
mhm,
Tainted Love too, which they
yep, you
use.
already mentioned that.
And we talked about Toxic by Britney Spears,
And
which
you
they also
mentioned
used
Spice
too.
Girls.
Yes. And the Spice Girls one was pretty wacky. It was kind of unexpected to have a song and dance number in Doctor Who, but you know what? We got away with it. And I know it's not necessarily pop music, but it is interesting. Rings of Akhenaten.
Yes, I was going to bring that up. Do we count Murray Gold's contributions?
I think you count that because you had an opera singer, or even the Christmas special too, where you have the ones where you have classical or opera singers involved. I count those because it's popular to somebody, right? Somebody's gonna. I mean, I learned about those artists through that, but I think that that Matt Smith story is very musical, and I think it's almost wrong to discount it completely.
Yeah. And then there was also Stowaway, unless that's the one you're referring to.
No.
Okay. Stowaway was another Murray Gold piece that hit the top of the pops. And they're trying to do that now with the Goblin song.
Yeah, we're gonna get the Goblin song is super popular. Everybody can't get it out of their head. It was the thing that ended up before that episode dropped. It was the thing that everyone was like stuck with as an earworm. And now that the Doctor has a jukebox in the TARDIS, anything can happen. And they have that budget that they can pay ASCAP BMI. So I think you're going to see more of it. I think as Doctor Who is branching off into Disney Plus and more things, you're going to see more pop music being brought into it to supplement the scores. I think that's something they might be doing, and they very much did it. It was kind of a big thing in the '60s, as we mentioned by your list. And then it kind of went away in the '70s and the '80s, and then it came back a little bit in the '90s, I believe. And then with the new series, we have a lot of musical things in there as well, too.
Yeah, because they moved away from the workshop to more original songs by a particular composer. So, I mean, Dominic Glenn has basically done all these other pieces from the Seventh Doctor that he's now releasing, which has been great.
And those have been fantastic. And I think that outside of Murray Gold, him and Murray Gold have the two biggest like pop sensibilities to their style. Meaning they can do orchestration and they can do themes and incidental music, but I think they also listen to enough pop music that kind of seeps into what they do. And I think that with Murray Gold, I think he really relished doing that. I think he really, really, really enjoyed it. That might just be me.
But no, I'm one of the people who collects the soundtracks.
Yes.
All the Doctor Who's seasons, and just basically drive with them in the car because that was easier to distract myself rather than.
And the thing is about the soundtracks too is that they are all very much their own pieces of work. You can just kind of listen to them as regular music without knowing the context, and it's perfectly
the music
fine.
from the Flux have just been wonderful, eerie but wonderful.
I wish the scripts were as good.
Now we will get into other arguments about the music. Now you wanted to segue into something else too.
I did, I do think that before we segue into something else, we should talk about just the importance of music and framing Doctor Who. Doctor Who has
Yeah.
always had music framing it.
Yeah.
I think when you get into the Tom Baker era, particularly when you move into Hinchcliffe,
Yeah.
it sort of takes a pop music and contemporary music takes a backseat to this almost like classic Hammer horror music.
Yeah.
Which I do want to know because I think that is just as interesting. And I know we're supposed to be about pop music, but I do love the scores from a lot of those really fantastic Tom Baker stories. I wish those would come out by themselves as well.
Yeah.
But some of those are fantastic. And the McCoy and the Colin Baker and Davison eras, we get a little kind of hokey with some of the incidental music, but
some of it. Yeah, the festival music in the Fifth Doctor episodes, it was just another piece of CD I had to have.
I was going to say the music in the Five Doctors is probably the best use of music in the Davison era. And they especially made the music fit around each particular Doctor a little bit. Each Doctor kind of had their own little music thing going on, and I thought that was awesome as well.
Yeah, everybody had their own little themes. The Master had his themes. Yeah. Nyssa had her own theme. It was nice. They were actually thinking about adding more to the characters using music.
So let's talk about one of the fun snippets of Doctor Who and pop music. It may be the most popular merging of the two until we get to another record I'll talk to in a minute. But I want to talk about John Pertwee and I Am the Doctor, which is more like John Pertwee just talking over music about how he's the Doctor. But it's, you know what? 40 or 50 years later, it's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. It feels like he's walking through this chaotic landscape. Just okay.
It kind of reminded me of Leonard Nimoy singing the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins, because it's more like he's telling a story than he's singing a song.
Yeah.
Right. And it was funny because I saw John Pertwee at a couple conventions, and he always would talk when they would bring this up. He just always made this face of like, why did I do that? Right.
Yeah.
But it's still fantastic. It's still just a fun little record. And then the other record that man, at the time we all thought it was really fantastic, and then now we're just cringe at it. But Doctor in Distress,
yes, especially the high notes. Oh dear, that Nicola Bryant was doing.
People from lots of different bands and backgrounds and things all doing a Save Doctor Who record when it was under threat of cancellation during the Colin Baker years.
Wasn't that a great idea?
Anthony Ainley's on it, Colin Baker's on it, Nicola Bryant's on it, a couple other folks. It is painfully catchy. The Doctor in Distress, let's all answer his SOS.
Yeah.
Boy, we all went out and bought it though, didn't we? But now, man, I still have it, but I'm like, man, this is horrible. Man, it's just, it is very much of its time, right? And it's also of a time when everyone was making charity records, and that was kind of the big thing. And it, you brought up the Nicola Bryant singing, and I'm like, oh yeah, ugh.
Yeah, she was trying to do opera. I was like, oh dear, no. Yeah, everybody had their own musical pitches on that.
Yeah, and then
that's a catchy song, as you mentioned. Yeah,
that's what it's designed to do, but I don't think it really persuaded anybody from canceling Doctor Who. Probably the most successful thing of Doctor Who and pop music is the Time Lords, Doctor in the TARDIS.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard the background of this record, of how it sort of happened?
No, I don't. So if I did, I've forgotten. So go ahead.
There's a band called the KLF, and they had made a record called 1987, and they blatantly sampled like the Monkees and ABBA and the Sex Pistols. All like they sampled everybody, right? Well, this did not sit well with ABBA, and as a result, they got sued by ABBA, and they had to destroy all the copies of the record.
Wow.
Right. And they had a ton of bills. They were probably musically I'm encapsulating this into a very short story, but basically they needed a number one record and a lot of money really quick. And they actually turned how they made Doctor in the TARDIS into a book called The Manual, How to Have a Hit Record, right? So they basically made Doctor in the TARDIS, where they sampled Gary Glitter, Rock and Roll, Part 2, and then the theme from Doctor Who. They realized that they both were in the same beats per minute, and they got a Dalek voice to go over it, and the video for it has like a really hokey made Dalek, and
Really hopefully. Yes.
they
And the
the
car.
well, that was a symbol of the KLF. It's in like all their videos and stuff. Is this old police car, and it's just the police car driving around. But I remember with great delight going to the record store and not knowing this existed. And I'm rooting through my import bins, little young me, young impressionable new wave me, and I see this the Time Lords, and it says, "I'm for Time Lord. I'm a card. I've made a record." I'm like, what is this? And it turns out, it got played in clubs, it got played everywhere, and it was like, wow. I mean, for me, it was very invigorating because it was like, I imagine must have been like what hearing Nico for Star Wars fans was. It's like,
Mm.
I can hear this thing that I love everywhere, and it's okay. I'm not
I can
like,
dance to it.
I can dance to it, and I'm safe, right? Um, and I think, even though it's really cheesy and hokey, it was kind of a celebration of, Doctor Who and just how much people love it
Yeah.
across the board in Britain. But it also, I think, made people just sort of go that never knew what that was. Like, wait, what is this? Right?
What does that strange thing have to do with the car with the what?
Yeah, because they put it out as a 7-inch single, a 12-inch single, a CD single, and then a little 10-inch CD single. I think I've got it on like 6 or 7 different formats of that thing, right? But it's fantastic.
Mhm.
Another fun little record is the Human League, as a B-side, put out a song called Tom Baker, and they had 2 sleeves to the 45
Mhm.
had the regular picture on one side, but the back was a picture of Tom Baker from like the nose to the forehead, and it just said Tom Baker, and it's an instrumental, but it's still fantastic.
Ah.
I was just excited to see, ooh, Tom Baker, and then, oh, Tom Baker's not on the record, but yeah, I also have an affinity going back in time a little bit for the Fraser Hines record
Ooh, which one's that?
that he did. I think he did. Is it Who's Doctor Who? I think that's he did. There was a CD came out a couple years ago with a bunch of artists singing Doctor Who songs, and he did one, and it was really, 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 really good. I believe it's Who's Doctor Who. I'm gonna have to check this out now. Um, um, but yeah, it was a lot of fun. He obviously recorded it when he was very young.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's Who's Doctor Who from 1968.
Whoa,
And
yeah, he was very young. But
yeah,
he was in the show at that point, wasn't he?
no.
No?
Well,
Eight?
oh yeah, he still was. Yeah, he was. Because it came out on Major Minor Records in October of 68. Um, so there is that
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a fun little kitschy record in the 80s or in the 60s, right? The late 60s, the sort of time when novelty records were really dropping everywhere.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, which was a whole lot of fun as well. Um, and then, I think the other great thing about pop music and Doctor Who is that we talked about how it gives people a frame of reference, but it also gives people like a feeling of, you know, I have 2 popular passions of my life that I'm bringing together. For me, it was great because I'm bringing together my love of Doctor Who and my love of music,
Mhm.
right? And for me, that was great. I just loved having that stuff around,
Mhm.
and I felt more vindicated having the two together, right?
Yeah.
Um, I just thought that was really great.
I mean, having the Tainted Love and Toxic at the end of the world and end of the world, that was just she mislabeled what it was. And it was just a cool little fascinating thing of saying, yes, this is the far future. What remains behind, people are not going to be able to interpret correctly, but it was fun to listen to that.
Yeah, and there is actually music in one of the Capaldi specials as well, I believe.
Mhm.
That's also really great.
Well, I mean,
And
a lot of the ones that Murray Gold composed for like
yeah, that just popped into my head because we were talking
yeah,
about it. Yeah.
Heaven Sent, Shepherd's Boy. And that was just a wonderful piece. I wish they released the soundtrack for season 10.
Oh
Series
yeah, I know.
10.
I wish they would too,
Yeah,
but they
because I
won't.
Yeah.
They will
That's
not.
the only one they haven't released. It's like,
Yeah.
the one I want the shepherd's voice, so I can keep playing it over and over and over again.
You know, what's interesting too is there is a band that was really popular for a brief time in the 80s that I loved a lot. And it was called Dalek, I Love You. And they ended up doing pretty well for
Oh,
a little bit, and they burnt out. And then I also remember they made the BBC Radiophonic Workshop Doctor Who 25th anniversary record. That was just great. It was like
yeah.
orchestral versions of all kinds of things. And that's a predecessor for those soundtracks that you were talking about, right? I think that was it too. And then I also have variations on a theme, which was kind of different sort of variations of the Doctor Who theme on a thing, but they were very much trying to put Doctor Who in the pop world, right?
Mhm.
They were very much trying to make people excited about it.
Yeah.
And um, what they ended up doing without trying is laying the foundations for um, these soundtrack albums that we all know and love now.
Mhm.
You
I
know,
mean,
I
for the
think
longest time, we were able to access, there was the sound effects record.
yes, yes.
And yes, all it did was a staser gun, but it's still the sound
Uh,
effect of the staser gun.
the thing I love too was the how they had the picture discs of those, right? There's
Yeah.
so many like just great novelty things. You know, they released, and I believe, didn't they have the Tom Baker theme? Not the Tom Baker song, but the Tom Baker theme itself
Mhm.
was actually a release.
Yeah, it was.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah.
I think we
Um,
got the 45 somewhere around here still.
you know, and it was pretty much a big deal when Doctor Who was on PBS over here, people trying to get a physical copy of the theme to like play, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um,
And not just those people making their own fan videos,
yeah,
although that did happen.
yeah. There's a really great CD called Who's Doctor Who
Mhm.
that is out that is really fun. That's the one that's got the Fraser Hines on it, I believe.
Mhm.
Um, but it's got just all kinds of crazy stuff. It's got like the Earthlings, March of the Robots, Jack Dorsey and his orchestra, Dance of the Daleks. They've got Roberta Tovey with the orchestra doing Not So Old, The Eccentric Doctor Who by the Malcolm Lockyer Orchestra. Who's Doctor Who by Fraser Hines. Also, Punch and Judy Man by Doctor Who. It also has Who is the Doctor? Oh, and I forgot about the horrible other version of that he did, Pure Mystery, by John Pertwee. And then this also has Time Traveler, which had an unreleased Fraser Hines. So Fraser Hines did a couple Doctor Who songs, and a band called, I love this one. When I say it's by the Go-Go's, it's not by that Go-Go's, but a precursor of the Go-Go's. That used the Go-Go's and they just sort of never did anything. But I'm gonna spend my Christmas with a Dalek.
Oh, I remember that. Oh.
Yeah, that was fun too.
Mm.
Um, I was like, oh, so that that kind of takes us into sort of the biggies, right? Um, is there a piece of popular music that you think should be in Doctor Who or that you'd like to hear in Doctor Who?
I'm the wrong person to ask because I listen to soundtracks
That's
and
okay, but is
I
there,
don't follow any other artists unless they do. I don't even
yeah,
follow any artists nowadays.
but I mean, is there anything from like, I mean, especially now because we're in the era that we're in now. Um, do you find yourself like, is there anything from a musical or something that you'd like to see in Doctor
Yeah,
Who?
I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm the one who listens to music, instrumental music in the background when I'm writing.
Ah, is there a piece of classical music you'd like to see in, you think? I'd like to hear some Beethoven in Doctor Who, you
Mm.
know, especially they've got so much of this classical music is so like it's very much like Murray Gold. It's
Mhm.
sweeping and it's orchestral, and I just think they could really do some stuff with it.
Mhm.
But that's just me.
But they do
Um,
that at the proms all the time. So it's like I can't think of any other thing.
yeah. But the problems themselves are fun, right?
Mm.
You get to get a
Yeah.
lot of these contemporary people do stuff with on Doctor Who, and that's neat. The other thing I should mention, oh, I completely forgot to mention this.
Mhm.
Um, there is a band called Orbital, and they have an album that
Oh,
has a song
yes.
called Doctor, and it's Doctor Question Mark,
Mhm.
right? And it's them doing the Doctor Who theme.
Yeah.
And then they have another song called Doctor Look Out, which you hear Sarah Jane Smith just going, Doctor Look Out, you know. Um,
How
and
many
then
did?
elsewhere on another record, they have You Lot, a song called You Lot, which has Christopher Eccleston on it. But he's reading a speech that is very, very much a Christopher Eccleston Doctor Who speech. It's not from Doctor Who, but it sounds like it very much is, right? But you get to hear Eccleston sort of talking over a record as well.
Okay.
And kind of pop culture adjacent as well. Peter Capaldi and Craig Ferguson were in a band, and they had a single out as well. If you can find that'd be a hoot as well. But that covers a lot of ground with Doctor Who and pop music. I mean, you have several doctors that have made records. You've got Capaldi actually made a whole album too a couple years ago.
Okay.
And it's not bad. It's very, very good, actually. I was kind of surprised. He worked with this guy named Dr. Robert, who was in a band called the Blow Monkeys. And he put out an album of his own. And it's not bad. I mean, he was still the doctor when he made it.
Okay.
But it was called St. Christopher. And that dropped in 2021.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I remember, talking to him about that briefly once. And
then of course we had the musical number that Craig Ferguson had.
Oh my God, wasn't that fantastic?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was a hoot. And we also had, Capaldi was very musical because you have him with the guitar and everything as well, right?
Yeah.
We should also mention, spoilers, kids, that the first Shitty Gatwa season features the Doctor and the Beatles, which we everybody's been dancing around this for a while, and it's going to actually happen.
Yeah, I think they said episode 2.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah,
I think
look forward to.
we can't actually play any of the Beatles music, but we're going to have the Beatles on. I'm curious to see how this gets worked out.
Yes.
As well, but I think not having the Beatles in the chase, it doesn't ruin the experience on the American CD, but boy, it sure is fun watching it. I watched that when I was a kid on Channel 9 on PBS here in St. Louis, and I just thought that was just the coolest thing ever. And I wish that other people could experience that.
Yes, because it just added so much to that whole idea of like, yeah, they can do a time-space visualizer, and here's the Beatles.
Yeah, we were, I asked you about what songs you'd like to hear in the Beatles or in Doctor Who, right? Besides the Beatles, I think I'd like to hear some, just to make it interesting. I'd like to hear some Motown, just to see how they use that. I don't really feel the need for them to use any metal. We're going to get some more electronic music, I think, this coming season. So we'll get some sort of contemporary electronica kind of stuff. But I think I'd like, a little more kind of darker. They would call it post-punk or goth kind of stuff. I kind of want some of that to seep in, not necessarily The Cure or Susie and the Banshees per se, but something along those lines that's a little darker.
Okay.
We kind of got a little dark with Hinchcliffe and some of the Davison ones. The scoring was pretty dark, but it really framed the stuff well. And Russell T Davies, like Stephen Moffat, was a fan of pop music, but their tastes are fundamentally different, right? I think you're going to get much more contemporary stuff, whereas Moffat used a lot of older things when they went to when Angels Take Manhattan. You got a score that kind of matched that, right? When they did the Daleks in Manhattan as well, screwing around with the Empire State Building, that also kind of
more period piece.
Which I think does count because it's pop music of that time. Which I don't think is necessarily bad. It's just a little more interesting. But I do think they use that. Now the other thing that's interesting about pop music, and I know this is Doctor Who, but boy, did Torchwood really use it.
Oh gosh, yes.
Torchwood was kind of like the dumping ground for pop music. There's a lot of pop music in Torchwood. I have not made a list of that, but it is definitely
a show episode.
It was really glued in to the zeitgeist of what was going on sort of then. and I think that that was kind of almost oversaturated sometimes,
Mhm.
right? With how they used it.
Yeah.
But I think, looking back at it, there's
Mhm.
just this rich tapestry of Doctor Who
Yeah.
and pop music. There's a band called Renegade Soundwave that put out an album. They sampled the TARDIS landing and they kind of
Hmm.
distorted it a little bit. That was kind of cool. Um, there's just all sorts of just really strange, you
Shall we
know.
mention Canine and Company? Hmm.
I was gonna save that kind of for but you are more than welcome to mention Canine and Company.
It's a
Um,
catchy tune, but
you know, I love John Leeson. I think he's fantastic,
Mhm.
but Canine and Company, man.
I don't remember any outside music in the Sarah Jane Adventures. But I
I don't
think they were doing
no,
rather,
I think that played it straight and used a lot of atmospheric stuff
yeah.
too.
Hmm.
Um, but man, Canine and Company. The thing is about the theme from Canine and Company, it was so catchy. It was so terrible, it was catchy,
Yeah.
right? And it is very much of the time, which is interesting about Doctor Who and some of this pop music stuff, is you can listen to it and it still sounds fairly contemporary, right? Or it's like the Beatles where it's timeless.
Yeah.
But you listen to some of the stuff from the 80s,
Hmm.
it is very much dated. And
Yeah.
you listen to Canine and Company, it is very much dated.
Uh, but also to
Whew.
the electronics from the Third Doctor episodes. Like that was
Oh
just
yeah,
weird noise.
yeah. Well, that was kind of their attempt to make it,
Alien.
the Alien. It's very much sort of Kraftwerk, krautrocky kind of stuff, um, where they really wanted that sort of atmosphere
Hmm.
um, in the show, right? And it's very, the show very much plays upon the stuff of the times.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah.
Now, there was one other thing you wanted to bring up.
I think what I wanted to bring up was Canine and Company again. But I mean, I don't want to bring it up again, but that was what I was going to bring up is that one. Um, just because it's so awful. That was the biggie I wanted to bring up
Okay.
for everyone. And I love the fact that we um get to talk about the cheesiness of that. It's just like, ugh. Oh, the other thing, it's not quite Doctor Who, because it wasn't necessarily in the show, but Billy Piper and Because I Want to,
Okay.
her pop
That's right.
record,
You wanted to do people outside of the
a
show.
little bit, yeah,
Mhm.
like because we talked about Capaldi. Billy Piper had a pop record, but she was a teenager at the time, and I think she's really embraced sort of that part of her past well and moved on from it. But it's definitely that. Oh, and we had Kylie Minogue on Doctor Who as well,
Mhm.
which is also interesting. Um, and I'm trying to think of other musicians that were on, and I know for years it was always talked about David Bowie being on Doctor Who, and it just never
Mhm.
manifested. But it's fantastic that we got Kylie Minogue. She was just a hoot in that too.
Mhm.
It's one of the Christmas ones.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking
The
of
first
any other
the
other than
tenant one.
jazz players that we had in the Seventh Doctor. Other than,
Yeah,
do we have any other singers?
we might have. You know, there were a few. God, I know I'm missing some. Um,
Because the trouble is, as soon as they were always considered to be stunt casting, and oh my gosh, they can't act. They're only singers, like they did with Billy Piper when she first came on.
yeah, exactly,
Bonnie
exactly. Right.
Langford, oh, she's only a dancer. It's like, wait.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it too. I think there's a Doctor Who episode too where they mention, they refer to Elvis, they refer to Frank Sinatra, so
Mhm.
those kind of exist.
Oh yeah,
Um,
because that was Matt Smith running into them and marrying Marilyn Monroe in that episode.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah. But we also get Muse. There's a band called Muse. They use Supermassive Black Hole. Um, there's a scene with Rory and the TARDIS, and they're playing darts, and they use that. That's in there, and then oh man, it's gonna drive me nuts now. There's got to be more. Oh, David Tennant's taking Rose to go see an Ian Dury concert as well.
Okay.
That's in one of the episodes, and then uh, in the episode Dreamland, I think we get the Everly Brothers are played in there too. So there are several examples of this. Beyond what we know normally. Sometimes if they can't get the actual music, they will use the artist and kind of make a passing reference, right?
Yeah.
Which is not a bad thing to do when you think about it. Kind of works. So
now, are you expecting to have more top of the charts from Murray Gold coming in the?
I think you're going to see two things. I think you're going to see a little more of the traditional Murray Gold kind of stuff, which you take for what it is. But I also think you're going to see more pop songs get placed in Doctor Who. The Pet Shop Boys did a song called Radiophonic that's about the radiophonic workshop, right? Yeah. So I think you're going to see stuff get placed. I think you're just going to see really popular songs that get placed, like Ollie from Ollie Alexander, who's in It's a Sin, but his character plays a character of Doctor Who, and he's said to be a big Doctor Who fan. So I think you're going to see, especially because it's so institutionally popular, you're going to see like pop musicians cross over into it, or you might just see like they're walking by a TV and somebody's on TV. You're going to see more of that kind of stuff, just because I think that it's a global audience now, it's a global market, and they're really going to try to tie in as much as they can with it. And it's Disney.
Yeah,
Disney puts music in all, but they put music in all their properties. But I do think the best use of music in an episode is probably ELO in
Blue Sky, Mr. Blue Sky.
Yeah. Mr. Blue Sky, it's everywhere. If you've never heard that song, you've heard it now.
Over and over. But it worked with that episode.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because I just associated with Lucy. It's like, okay, this is
yeah, exactly. And also too, it is musically a little bit putting Troughton with a recorder did sort of take the show into a direction of like, okay, we're going to have a musical element to the show. And once they introduce that with Troughton, the Doctor does have an interest in music, and they bring it back. Now you do get in the Doctor dances, I think you hear a little bit of Glenn Miller in the Doctor dances and some of that kind of stuff too. I think you get Moonlight.
That was the time period for it, yeah.
I think you get a little bit of Moonlight Serenade in that episode. So you get some of that as well. So again, it kind of all fits in. So as we wrap this up, do you have any final thoughts on pop music in Doctor Who, or just how music for popular culture is used in Doctor
Who? Regret that we no longer can get back to the Beatles back in the older ones because they tried everything. It's like being able to listen to the telesnaps and actually hear them, paperback writer being played in the background. That was just, oh my gosh, I totally forgot about that. But music is always important to set the tone of the particular episode. So I very good. Sometimes if they ever get the balance right, because BBC America could not get the music balance right, because I was finding out the dialogue. But because it's going to be streaming,
and it's Disney, and Disney does not screw around.
Yeah, it'll probably be set much better. And again, setting the tone of that particular scene, Murray Gold is very good at that.
Yeah, almost annoyingly so.
Yeah,
because you got that whole season with Clara and Matt Smith, dun 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 dun. Everywhere you went, you got that sort of theme, but it was almost like pop music in that it was just so repetitive. It was just very, very repetitive. But yeah, I think you're right. I think we're going to see some of these things that were originally taken out of episodes maybe come back in later. Maybe after doing a Beatles episode, you get that back in, and
it'd be the right stuff.
I mean, like they can put it in the Chase in Britain, but they can't put it in America. So it's very strange for the Chase. But that's the biggest example of it, right? And I do think that as you mentioned with Fleetwood Mac, I do want to hear those songs in their original context in the episodes.
Yeah.
I just think it's better.
Because that
So,
was basically the way the director and the showrunner decided to have it.
mhm,
But I
it
mean,
is true.
it's the same thing now with the animated episodes. There are so many, they shortened looking at the telesnap of Evil the Daleks and then actually seeing what they did with the animated version. That scene was shortened as
Yeah,
well as have taken the music out. So pluses,
there
minuses,
there are several problems I have with that, but
that's
with
another
that
panel.
whole that's a whole nother panel with
Yeah.
some of the stuff they did with that animation. But I do think too, the other thing that's interesting is Russell T Davies is not afraid to go back to it, over and over again. I mean,
Hmm.
we saw with Eccleston, he just used music in that whole first season,
Hmm.
and then he kind of backed off just a little bit, and it kind of came back. But I think now with him running the whole show and being the boss,
Hmm.
I think he's going to take it and run.
Yeah.
And I think
But
Shooty is going to be,
modern audiences are expecting that
yeah,
nowadays.
I mean, we see Shooty in a club, right? We're going to see more of this. This is
Yeah.
going to be a doctor that's very into music and into the contemporary world, I
Hmm.
believe. And I think that
Not
that's
instead
going
of
to
being the
heighten,
aristocrat standing off and just
yeah,
dealing with the public when he needs to, he's going to be with them.
yeah, I think that's going to be, I think it's a huge part of where we're going. We saw some of that in the special, but I think that's going to be a thing. So as we record this in late December, mid-December,
2023.
mid-December, yeah. So this has been great. I love talking about Doctor Who with you, but I also like talking about music with you. We've never done that, so this has been pretty fun.
Yeah.
Um, People can find me on Facebook and Post and whatever Twitter is now, and in those two books that you had mentioned. And I do panels for Dragon Con on Doctor Who and some other conventions. But you are everywhere. Why don't you tell people where they can find you?
At KathrynSullivan.com. At the convention, I will be in Artist Alley. I'll be on a lot of panels. So I will have copies of these books, limited copies, in the Artist Alley. And they're going to have a panel about Outside In Regenerates. So that ought to be fun.
That'll be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. Thank you for coming to attend our panel and hope you catch some of the other ones that are going to be live and recorded.
Every panel that they stream for this convention is just really fascinating, and it's a lot of work to do, and people put a lot of time and energy in it. So thank you to everybody who puts it together. Thank you guys for watching. Have a wonderful convention. Enjoy it. Celebrate Doctor Who for everything that it is. I remember what I want to talk about first
Okay,
before we go.
good.
They did a thing for the 60th anniversary. You should find these. They're on BBC Sounds. My Life as a Mixtape, where different actors involved in Doctor Who talked about the music that they listened to that they like. The Sylvester McCoy one was great. He starts at the beginning of his life, goes to now, and he talked about how he was on stage with the Rolling Stones. Sophie Aldred's is really great. She might have the best one. Janet Fielding did one. Peter Davison did one. I think Ruth Madeley did one. So there's a lot of really interesting. Oh, Bonnie Langford also did one as well. My life in a mixtape. It's
And
on
that's on
BBC
BB.
Sounds. BBC Sounds. You can just probably Google it. But that was pretty fantastic. So that is my closing gift to you about Doctor Who and pop music. You can just kind of hear some of the music that influenced the actors and people that made the show.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you for checking out our panel. We hope to see you around, either in the virtual Whoniverse or the real one. Thank you for checking out our panel. Please enjoy the rest of Console Room.